All right, welcome back to Firewall. I'm your host, Bradley Tusk. My guest is someone today that I'm really excited about. He was kind of this legend that I barely knew when I was a kid in government, and someone now that I get to work with and really proud of that. So the great Randy Mastro, first deputy mayor of New York City. Randy, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I mean, when you were a kid, I still feel very young.
Days.
I still feel very young.
Back in the StarQuest days, where like occasionally I'd get to come to a meeting, kind of sit on the side and see you or Loda or Powers or whoever. But it's fun to watch it all evolve over time. First of all, thank you. I think as the listeners know, we did a quick but successful campaign together to get City Bike to require age verification for minors. There was I think most people didn't realize it, but if you were a parent of teenage kids like me, you just knew that your sons were just lying about their age because the verification was, what's your date of birth, right? And as a result, you have these teenage boys going at top speed without helmets all through the city. And I wanted to do something about it, and you saw it, you jumped in, and you fixed it really fast, so thank you. That's great.
Well, it was the right thing to do, and it was part of a package of things that we did because e-bikes have become part of the way of life in New York City, but there have just been too many problems with them. Speeding, minors, other issues.
It's the number 2 cause now for ER visits.
Right. So when you talk about quality of life issues, having bike lanes improved quality of life. Having e-bikes out of control adversely affected quality of life. So we've taken that issue on. We couldn't wait for the legislature because the city council is where bills go to die.
Right.
Or
bad bills go to pass.
There you go. We did a series of measures, a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, and, of course, age verification.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to get into all of that, but as you and I were chatting right before we started, you have a very unique perspective because you were Giuliani's deputy mayor and chief of staff in the 90s. Now you're first deputy mayor under Eric Adams 27, 28 years later. One was a Republican, one was a Democrat. And so I think I don't know that anyone else would have the perspective that you have on this. So I guess the first question is on the government side. How has government and City Hall changed from your first stint to this one?
Well, it really has changed dramatically in this sense. Okay, City Hall has the two sides of the whole.
Right.
The administration, the city council. Unfortunately, what has evolved over the past 30 years is a kind of dysfunction between the two branches, and I think aggravated in very recent years with what council members describe as a progressive legislature.
Right.
Progressive used to mean, when I first came to City Hall, making progress. Now it seems to be, if I don't like the other side, I want to burn the house down.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a shame because the whole point of government, what always drew me to government, what I'm sure drew other people you admire to government and that you worked for, I'm sure what drew Mike Bloomberg to government was the chance to do a public service, a public good, get things done.
Right.
It seems to me the problem that we face today is there are too many people in government who would rather burn the house down than get positive things done. So there is a lack of communication. There's a vitriol that is dispiriting. On the other hand, you can still get a lot of good things done.
Right.
And if you just focus on the mission, even with that dysfunction, getting a lot of good things done. We've gotten a number of measures passed through the city council.
Yeah.
We got a unanimous budget passed that the mayor called the best budget ever and the speaker called near perfect.
Right.
When was the last time the mayor and the speaker agreed on something
Not
in these years?
Even though they're the same name, that's about all they seem to share.
That's the only thing they seem to share, yes.
Yeah.
So I would say this. When I served in the 90s, early 90s, the city was in crisis.
Yes.
When I've returned to city government now, when Eric Adams came into office, the city was in crisis. We're coming out of COVID, lost huge number of private sector jobs.
Yep.
People weren't returning to work. People wouldn't take the subways. Then we had the migrant crisis on top of that, where over 235,000 migrants kind of bust into our city by Texas. What the hell? So he had to deal with enormous crises. Crime was up. We were in dysfunction coming out of the de Blasio administration, another Democrat socialist type administration.
Yep.
So I see a lot of similarities that way. When Rudy Giuliani came into office, a Republican liberal, yes, there used to be a liberal party in New York City. We were in crisis, crime way up, over 2,000 murders a year, the economy down, Time magazine calling us the rotting apple in a cover story.
Yep.
I think Eric Adams faced similar challenges when he first came into office. But the difference was there was an attempt to find common ground, even though it was a predominantly Democrat legislature. We worked with Peter Vallone and his leadership team and the city council side,
Right.
and still got things done for the good of the city. That seems to have broken down.
So right. So look, you guys
Now.
were not. Rudy's not exactly a shrinking violet, right? You
No,
guys
he's
were
not.
a very aggressive administration and not afraid of a fight. In fact, sought them out frequently, and yet despite that, were able to work really cooperatively with Vallone and with the council and get a lot done. So Eric, if anything, is a little more easygoing than Rudy, right? And yet the culture has changed so much that what he has to work with is radically different. What has changed in society that led to the difference between people, how people behave then and how they behave now?
Well, that is a really, really good question. What has changed in society? I'm not going to describe it as a change in society necessarily, although there are reasons why the city council is different today, why a speaker had more control then than now, and has to do with term limits, for example, and how the way elections have happened since, with the turnover on the council.
Would we be better off without term limits?
Well, I think the city council has been worse because of term limits.
Okay.
You know, I think the citywide races,
Yeah.
maybe that was a good thing. And no disrespect to Mike Bloomberg,
you know,
he shouldn't have had a third
When,
term.
when the situation calls for it, perhaps someone can get the law changed.
Right. Yes, I know. They'll get it changed and then get it changed back.
I was fine with
but,
that.
But in any event, so, you know, and I think in Ed Koch, third term was a disaster for him.
Yes.
You know, I
Did you
think-
read Gods of New York?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
it captured it really well. I
It really
thought.
did.
Yeah.
You know, and so all I'm saying is that I think for citywide offices and the mayoralty, a 2-term limit makes sense. I think for the city council, it's been a disaster because it has tended to push people to the far left
Right.
who get into office. They're always looking for their next job, and we now have a dysfunctional city council. But at the end of the day, it's about leadership. Now, Eric Adams should have been a perfect mayor to work with the council because he is a really nice guy,
Yep.
a constructive partner. He wants to work with people, right? But on the council side, there's just been this hostility from the speaker on down.
Yeah. So let's say you guys had another year, and maybe you will. Would you push for charter reform to repeal term limits for the council?
I think that if we had charter reform, 2 things would be essential.
Yeah.
Okay. I've litigated, as you know, the term limits issue,
well aware.
and tried valiantly to prevent term limits from being overturned by legislation for Mike Bloomberg.
Yep.
I think that it was personally a mistake for him to do that because his legacy was tarnished by that, and he had a good legacy up till then.
Yeah.
And I think that we lost in court, but won in the court of popular opinion. And of course, he had to
Look,
vow to go back to.
I mean, when I
term.
ran the campaign, I would say a good 5 to 7 points of our margin disappeared because of that.
So I think that would be a positive to happen. But just as importantly, I think that it has to do with something that Mike Bloomberg also championed but couldn't get it done, and that we had hoped a Mayoral Charter Revision Commission would do this year, but they didn't have the guts to do.
Yeah.
All right, and that is, you know, nonpartisan elections.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you had nonpartisan elections, you would have more centrists, people who reflect the majority of New Yorkers, being elected. You wouldn't have people running to the extremes in Democratic primaries because the only real party in the city is the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, Mamdani did quite well, and yet he got 432,000 votes, which is 5% of the city's population. It's a greater percentage of the registered voters, but it's still, of overall New York, because all 100% are affected by the mayor every single day.
Right.
It's a tiny number. So, you've obviously...
And in every poll, Bradley,
Yeah.
He still doesn't meet that magic 50%.
Right. He's still in like mid to high, low to mid 40s in most of them. So you've been very supportive of the work we're doing on mobile voting, and I'm putting on the spot as a lawyer, and you might have to come back to me on it. But so I believe that I would do nonpartisan elections and mobile voting, but ultimately the goal either way is to get a lot more people participating to move things to the middle. I kind of feel like if I could put mobile voting before New York City voters in the charter, I think we could pass it, right? If I need Albany, they're the worst, right, in terms of reform.
Because they want
like
the
that.
status quo because
Exactly.
it worked for them.
Right. Do you, off the cuff, think we could pursue it through the charter, or do you think we're stuck with Albany?
I think that there's limits to what we can do in New York City because, as you know, all power emanates originally from Albany, and it's delegation of authority.
Yeah.
There are certain things that you can do, certain things you can't do. For example, the push by the city council to have resident aliens be able to vote in city elections, that was a bridge too far.
Yeah.
And the courts ruled that was, including the New York Court of Appeals, that was illegal.
Right.
So whether mobile voting would have to go through Albany or not, or Albany could put it on the ballot as opposed to the city putting it on the ballot, that's a legal question.
Yeah, that's
would
the
have to be
question,
pursued.
right? Because it's a difference between realistic or not.
But let's put it this way: we are completely aligned in the notion that the more access to voting, the more ability to vote, the more make it easier to vote, the better it is for our democracy. I chaired Citizens Union for a decade.
That's my next question.
And we pushed hard for those things, and we achieved a lot.
Right.
Now we have early voting, and we have mail-in voting, and you can go and vote early. These are all major advances that we made, despite a lot of opposition in Albany along the way. So I'm very proud of that legacy of Citizens Union.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is of a piece with that.
Right. So one thing that you didn't mention, but I imagine you would agree that it is part of the reason why the politics and culture changed so much is social media, right? So it just didn't exist then, does exist now, and kind of infects or at least infiltrates everything. Do you think we're closer to where we were in the 90s in terms of the ability to kind of not just demonize everything without social media? Like, how big of a culprit is it in terms of the problem?
It's a huge culprit. We wouldn't have the Mamdani mania if it weren't for social media. Right. And it kind of happened off the radar screen. Andrew Cuomo ran a Democratic primary the traditional way, huge reliance on PACs and TAC ads at the end, typical endorsements.
Right.
Oh, just your typical Democrat race, and he got slaughtered.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not seeing how that is the way to run elections anymore.
Right.
Maybe it's a component,
although
endorsements obviously don't mean what they used to. And Mamdani did everything literally with a volunteer army and a social media campaign unlike anything we've ever seen before.
I mean, in terms of endorsements from elected officials, I would argue, other than Donald Trump in a Republican primary or Barack Obama in a Democratic primary, I don't think any of them matter. There's all this tumult over who is or isn't endorsing Mamdani. No one who's going to vote in the mayor's race is like, well, who is Hakeem for? They don't care. Unless if they even know who he is, or Schumer, or Hochul, so much energy gets wasted pursuing these endorsements that insiders think matter, and I don't think a single voter cares about it.
And I'll take it a step further, because it used to be, in the 90s, the union endorsements really mattered because they delivered a vote.
Yeah.
Today, the UFT endorses Mamdani, and the press reports are that the membership is overwhelmingly against Mamdani.
Right.
So they
UFT
just don't
also hasn't picked the right candidate in 7 elections.
I'm just saying that's just, I cite that as an example, as much respect as I have for certain people there. We have a completely different dynamic now.
Yeah. So one other thing to me that sort of changed or kind of went wrong is, so on the civic side, at Citizens Union, you guys kind of kept pushing the ball and making progress. But my view on the political side is, when I first started working in New York City government politics in the mid-'90s at Parks, you already saw the WFP coming together, Make the Road, DSA, and to their credit, even though I agree with them on very, very little, they work hard, right? They recruit candidates, they train candidates, they organize, they do grassroots. And I think what happened is you had Rudy and you guys were able to sort of field kind of a centrist political world and slate. And then Bloomberg, we could do the same thing.
And pay for it.
And pay for it, right? And, Mike had the money and the people on the team to do that stuff. But then when Mike left, he really left. He just said, I'm not interfering with local politics. And he left. And
that's really too bad because he had the ability and still had enough local support
at the time,
to pick a successor, to back someone for real. And he didn't really do that.
So I would argue slightly differently, which is I think if we did not do the third term, in 2009, his endorsement would have been incredibly important.
Incredibly.
I think by 13, people were tired of him and they were upset about the third term. And I think in some ways de Blasio won by being the anti-Bloomberg.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
And as you know, I represented Bill de Blasio in the challenge to term limits. And Christine Quinn, having been the one who delivered the legislation for Bloomberg on a third term,
she paid the price.
I think that she paid the price. Right? I think those things are right. I'm just saying, people like Rudy Giuliani and Mike Bloomberg, they're forces of nature.
Yeah.
You had the crusading prosecutor of national reputation who cleaned up New York as a prosecutor.
Yep.
You had the billionaire who could fund an amazing campaign and had brilliant advisors like yourself. I would get mailings and it was like they were reading my mind during that campaign.
Trust me.
Of what issues mattered to me, and I get this mailing like it's written to Randy Mastro.
Yeah, pretty much
it was very impressive. But and I agree with you that by the third term, he'd overstayed his welcome. But neither Giuliani nor Bloomberg ever thought about succession and what happened next.
Well, and I think so. Even if you so it's interesting, Mike, and I really disagree with him on this, but. So Mike so appreciated that Rudy did not interfere with his mayoralty because Rudy at that point just could have said anything he wanted and that would have effectively become public opinion, that he tried to replicate it. So I understood his intention, which was Rudy did this thing for me. That really gave me the freedom to be a good mayor. I'm going to give my successors that freedom. Logically, I got it. But I think the problem is, and I don't think Mike anticipated this, which was no one picked up the slack. Right? So the left just kept organizing and working hard and doing their politics and electing more and more people to office, de Blasio, Tish James, now Mamdani. And on the business side, the partnership sort of has this, we don't get involved in elections, which to me means you don't have any political relevance or power because all politicians care about is re-election. Rebney is in my view, and I'll say this on the record, incredibly outdated. They still run politics like it's 1957, and only focus on their very narrow issues. So even if they are effective on something, it is not for the greater good in any way. Abney is a nice place that serves breakfast, and there's literally not a single entity in the middle, in the business community, that is an effective political force. So of course we are where we are. What do we do about this?
I started with, nonpartisan elections are so important.
Right.
And that's why it was such a disappointment. I'll say it, that a Charter Revision Commission had that opportunity and didn't have the guts to put it on the ballot. Having said that, the middle, those interests you described, which are well-funded, instead of just funding anti-campaigns, they should be funding candidates who appeal to the average voter, because it's still the case, I think, that most New Yorkers, they're not lefty kooks. And they're not right-wing extremists either.
No.
They're in that middle. They want to see their city do well. They want to see a city that's safe, not defund the police, not attack the police. Find a city that's safe. They want the city to be affordable. and they want economic opportunity and a chance to raise their families. That's not a far left or a far right issue. That's the average New Yorker's aspiration. And if those groups would spend more time, I have many friends at Rebney. I have many friends in the partnership. If they would focus on helping candidates from the center, I think they could have winning campaigns. But that's why it's so important. Look what's happened. You talked about WFP.
Right.
Okay. And Democrats, socialists, and all that. And they are well organized, and they have armies of volunteers. But how did they do it? When you think about how they did it, it was a failure of the legislative process. Because what they did was, in the guise of public financing of campaign, they basically have funded themselves through public dollars because they get an 8-to-1 match on the first $250. That is ridiculous that people like Mamdani and others can run campaigns where the overwhelming majority of the money funding their campaign comes out of the public fisc. There's something wrong with that. We got too far out there.
What should the ratio be?
The ratio should be more like 1-to-1. Okay, you raise $1, you match $1. But what the WFP did in the day, before I exposed it in a lawsuit back in 2009, what they did was they'd go out and raise door to door to get small donations. That's still what Mamdani and company do. And then they get their 8-to-1 match, and they even had a field operation that basically was a sham because with public dollars comes a cap on what you can spend. So they would provide free labor on the field services side and their own field service organization, and we exposed that fraud. So they had to get rid of that, right? But the fact of the matter is that's because legislators endorsed this and allowed it to happen. That was crazy to do. So those who are from the center, the business community, the real estate community, and others, they need to fund candidates who stand for their values.
And I would argue, so now you have these emergency meetings of billionaires to try to stop Mamdani. You can't focus on this after you close out your house in Southampton and get back to the city, and there's 8 weeks left, right?
And it doesn't work because people want to be inspired, all right? Cuomo had 30 million to spread the Mamdani's a danger word, and it did, but there was no message of why we should support him. Right? So this is the problem. People want to be inspired with a message. They don't want to just hear the negative. Now, negative campaigning can work in certain circumstances. You know that better than me. But the fact of the matter is, what ultimately wins elections is you have a future vision. De Blasio, who was basically a Democrat socialist, right, and a WFP creation, right? He had the 3 legs of the stool when he ran, and universal, child, preschool and kindergarten, and he had protect community hospitals, and he had get rid of stop and frisk. Simple message. Mamdani has the same kind of thing. He can't deliver on any of it. I don't think he's going to be able to have free grocery stores. It's not up to the city to have free buses, and and he can't get that 1% through the legislature, that 1% tax hike. So, but it's resonating. And I don't think throwing lots of money in for negative ads at the end from the real estate community, which inspires his base, by the way, because they're like,
they
see the people who they hate are the ones going after our guy. That's not going to win the election.
So you've done a lot in a short period of time. We talked about the e-bike thing. What else have you been working on that you're excited about? And then you've got, let's be honest, 3 months left. What do you want to do? And I will tell you that yesterday I was talking to someone who works for an outgoing governor, and she was complaining to me that the governor and the team have basically just gone on vacation. And I was like, that's the exact opposite of what you should be doing. You should be doing every hard, unpopular thing now when you are no longer up for re-election. And said they should be doing what Mastro is doing. She agreed, but the rest of the team seems not to.
I'm super proud of this mayor. Because he's still working hard every day, no matter what the future is. And if the future holds that there's more time, great. But I didn't come into this situation expecting necessarily more time. I came into this situation to do a public service. that 9 months for me is a long time, and you can get a lot done. And I'm happy to go through some of those accomplishments.
Yeah.
But you do hard things. You do hard things like, let's get rid of the horse carriage industry now. It's time.
Yeah.
Right? Now is the moment.
We've been talking about that for a dozen years.
Yeah. Exactly. This mayor is meeting the moment. We've had a series of horrific incidents recently. A horse dropped dead. 3 other horses earlier this year, including one a couple of weeks ago, just running wild, and the people in the carriage jumping out of the carriage and hurting themselves because the horse was running wild. And the Central Park Conservancy coming out and finally saying, enough of these horses in Central Park, where we have 42 million people a year visit us, right? So the mayor is meeting the moment, and he's leading that charge. And, that's the kind of thing you can and should be doing during this period of time. The mayor leading the way on a budget that, I'm just so proud of him for what he's done, but funding universal after school. We have universal kindergarten, right? And we've started with, pre-K, right? Universal after school is so essential to families. This is a great thing to have done. We funded more police, more teachers. We have, funded culturals, baselined their budgets and added $30 million for the first time in years, never baselined before. More for libraries, more for parks and cleaning, more for sanitation and cleaning, all these quality of life issues that matter so much. We've funded transformational projects like Fifth Avenue of the Future, that's going to convert it into something as beautiful as the Champs-Élysées.
Yeah.
And now we have the Brooklyn Marine Terminal Project, which will be transformative in Brooklyn, and we're going to get that across the finish line. The vote will be this coming Monday. Just so many great things you can do as an administration that you can affect through a budget, which passed unanimously, and that you can do through your actions in government. So I'm super proud of what the mayor is doing now. The e-bike crackdown, incredibly important for quality of life. But we've been doing so many things. We've funded so many affordability programs. We've basically eliminated the tax for lower income, the city income tax for lower income New Yorkers. For all those who have student loans, we have set up a special program for financial advisors to get their loan payments reduced by thousands of dollars a year and ultimately forgiven if they are in public service for 10 years. I mean, these are all things that are, any one of them would be a proud part of the legacy. All of them together are why this city will be strong. And what we need to do now, and I'm sure Mike Bloomberg felt the same way when he was winding down. You try and make as many of these things as permanent as possible, so that the city is protected, no matter what happens next.
Right. So there are a couple quality life things that I think maybe still could be improved upon. So I'm going to throw them at you and tell me what you think. So one would be the mayor did close a whole bunch of illegal weed shops. In fact, Erica, who's sitting next to us, was a big part of that. But there are still a bunch open. And to me, at least, it just, you and I are both believers in broken windows theory. So if you think about it, the signal of, hey, illegal drugs are just freely available here is like no one's in charge. There's no law. There's no order. What would it take to just get the rest of them closed?
State law changed, which permitted the mayor and his administration really before I got there. As I like to say, Eric Adams has a great record to run on. Crime down by historic proportions, jobs up to record levels, affordable housing produced at an unprecedented rate. Okay, he's got all these great achievements, including closing over 1,000 illegal weed shops before I got there. I can't take credit for it, but I will.
Sure.
But now you've given me an assignment for the last 3 months. And hopefully beyond. But for the next 3 months. To reassess where we are there and close more of them because it's an important quality of life issue.
And I would argue that, so in Connecticut, they found fentanyl in weed sold in an illegal shop. I would argue that if a neighboring state has found something that is so dangerous that it will kill people immediately, that seems like ample grounds for me for a public health emergency to say these stores cannot stay open, and if you want to sue us on due process grounds, we could see you in court in 7 years and figure it out. But I because I have two, just like with the e-bike thing, I have two teenage kids, and I know that there's an epidemic of teenage kids who can buy weed at these shops, and a lot of that stuff has stuff that's not inspected or regulated in it, and we're just creating a generation of addicts for no reason.
So as a father of a daughter, I empathize with your concern. I'm not sure the fact that in one place in Connecticut they found such a thing, that's a basis legally for us to do that, and that I can be very aggressive.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm aware.
But
I was just trying to give you grounds in some way to work
thank
with.
You, thank you. But I do think that we have the tools now, and it would be a positive thing over the next several months to focus on closing even more weed shops that are operating illegally.
Illegally, right. The legal ones, the legislature made that choice.
The ship already sailed on
that's different,
legalization.
Right, but hopefully they're at least inspecting the products and not selling to kids. Right. This one, I don't know that you have any legal authority over it, but I just think it really makes New Yorkers mad, which is the shoplifting epidemic, right? Mm-hmm. So you can't go to CVS or anywhere and get a tube of toothpaste without having to ask someone to unlock a case for you, which leads impatient people like me to instead just order everything on Amazon, right? And it's something like 220 people commit over a third of the shoplifting, and yet they are just released over and over and over again.
This is
what do we do about this?
This is an example of the state legislature and the local legislature having been pushed so far to the left that they've lost sight of what the average New Yorker considers a problem.
Yeah.
This has to do with, quote unquote, bail reform or no bail, because people just get let out in a revolving system. It has to do with the constraints on judges and what they can do. There was some improvement on the discovery rules at the request of the DAs, so that cases aren't automatically dismissed because a piece of paper from 15 years ago wasn't produced timely. But the bail reform issue remains a vexing one, and there hasn't been enough improvement there. There needs to be more of a crackdown. Now, crime in general is down.
Yes.
In almost every category. So that is a positive thing.
But
I thought you were going to raise a different issue.
Which was?
And when I'm asked, if you don't mind, I'll
please.
ask myself a question to give it.
Yeah, go for it.
When people ask me what's the one thing that I would like to see changed that I haven't been able to help this mayor achieve, knowing what he wants to achieve, and I'm very focused on quality of life.
Yeah.
It relates to your question. It has to do with crime, but it also has to do with too many distressed homeless.
Yeah, that was my next question anyway.
Being left out on the streets.
Yeah.
Many of them have mental illness problems. Most, in fact, probably the vast majority, have addiction problems. I'm sorry, it is not humane.
Yes, I agree.
To leave people out on the streets who can't help themselves. So that's why the mayor has proposed legislation to be able to address this and have people who have these addiction problems, which, by the way, under our law, the way it has evolved, state law and judicial interpretation, if you're an addict, right, and you're in a distressed situation and you're taken off the street and then you dry out, okay, you're not considered a danger to yourself or others. You're not a danger to yourself when you're killing yourself with drugs and alcohol. But that's the way the law has evolved in New York.
Right.
And the mayor says, let's change the law and help people who can't help themselves, have to help themselves. And, to me, that is the one thing that I wish we could do more about. And it affects quality of life every day because we all experience it on the subways and on the streets, and it affects our quality of life when we don't have those problems. But more importantly, it's not humane. It's not right to leave those people out on the street.
Is there grounds for kind of a citizens class action suit of some kind? Because there's what you said about the humanity of letting people sleep on the street, which I agree with completely. But there's also this presumption that the rights of the addicted or the mentally ill are somehow more significant than the rights of everyone else to just feel safe. And look, I would argue that there's this huge cognitive dissonance in New York right now where the crime stats are very good, the mayor is very unpopular, and I think it's because even though the underlying crime stats are really good, there are these highly visible things that make people feel uncomfortable. The mentally ill on the subways and on the streets, the illegal weed shops, the scaffolding everywhere, the shoplifting epidemic, until you got into the e-bike situation, that create a feeling of anxiety among voters and among people. I mean, is there in the law like a more... Is that class of people more privileged in some way than everyone else?
It's a measure of how dysfunctional the legislative branches, state and local, have become. That's apparently their view of the universe, that they have to pass laws that protect these people being able to stay on the streets, particularly in the wintertime when it's a threat to their well-being. I don't know how they can view the situation this way, but the way they articulate it with great passion is, that we're acting to protect them from the state, the state or the city. Okay, the state and the city want to help them, by getting them off the streets and into treatment, and that's the fundamental disconnect. I hear this all the time. Yeah. If you don't support, supportive housing projects, if you don't support, protections for the distressed homeless on the streets to be able to stay there, you are somehow a right-wing lunatic. No, you're not. You're a person with a heart who wants to have a situation where they can get help even if they can't help themselves.
I would argue that a lot of what we see from the left is really driven by a desperation for moral superiority, and the way that they feel good about themselves and the way they identify themselves is, I'm a better person than everyone else, and so they keep looking for issues, no matter how crazy they might seem rationally, to sort of further make that case. And so I'm not really sure concern for anyone other than sort of their own identity and own ego is really what drives any of this.
Well, I'm going to give you an example in my own experience more recently. Okay, I'm all about trying to find solutions to vexing problems that other people couldn't find a solution for. What we're doing with the horse carriage industry right now, God bless Mayor Adams for having the guts to do it and take it on. And we hope to get done what mayors haven't been able to get done for decades, right? Even though they favored it, including de Blasio, who committed to shut down the industry but never got it done. All right. So Elizabeth Street Garden, not too far from where we're taping the show. All right. Around the corner. A beloved community jewel. It's a beautiful garden, right? Affordable housing advocates made this a symbol, like a cause celeb. We have to close that garden in that spot to build 123 units of affordable housing for seniors. I said, Mayor, give me a little time. Let me see if I can work something out. Okay. Managed to convince a private developer down the block to add 123 units of senior affordable housing to his project. Got the local councilman who wanted to save the garden, who had opposed every development project in his district, to commit in writing and publicly that I will support rezoning, upzoning to create those 123 units. But we didn't stop there. We go 5 blocks away. Another project he'd stopped, right? Because he would never vote for it, okay? Going to create hundreds of units of affordable housing there that we couldn't have done without the local councilman's support, because the city council has this arcane
should they even have that?
No, they shouldn't, but they do. So we got him to agree to that. And then we, as administration, have a priority to take 100 Gold Street near City Hall, where HPD is now, and convert that into affordable and market housing, hundreds of units. I managed to broker a deal, get the support of the local council member who had publicly opposed that project, right? The hundreds of units at Gold Street, right? To reverse his position and support 5 times the affordable housing, including the same 123 units of adult senior housing down the block. And now those seniors, when they have that housing, will be able to go to this beautiful little garden.
Yeah, it's a
down
lovely
the block.
garden. My daughter studies there.
Okay,
Yeah.
you know, as we have a president who seems to be lobbying for the Nobel Prize all the time.
Yes.
I mean, this is kind of like 5 times the affordable housing, and we saved the garden. It should have been universally applauded. Instead, reviled in the affordable housing community because I didn't force Elizabeth Street to become affordable housing, and the mayor supported 5 times the affordable housing.
Yeah.
This is how crazy we are.
By logic.
This is how crazy we are.
So the last question,
today.
which is, let's just assume for the sake of this question that Mamdani's leads holds and he wins, and he comes to you and says, Randy, okay, I'm going to be mayor. What do you know this a lot better than I do. What do I need to know, and what would you recommend I do? What would you tell him?
Okay. First thing, if that happened, I'll drop over dead. I'd be shocked if he.
I'm not saying it's likely. Okay. I'm just saying, but if I were him, I would.
Yeah, let's be clear. I've already been quoted in Bloomberg News as saying I will never work for a socialist. Right. But that doesn't,
if he asks you
that
for
doesn't
advice,
mean I
you'd
wouldn't.
give it to him, right?
That doesn't mean I wouldn't give him my advice because.
Sure. You love the city.
I love the city, but what he wants to do is antithetical to almost everything that I believe in. Okay?
With that said,
I'm sorry, I'm an avowed capitalist. I'm not a socialist.
Right.
Okay? And the city thrives because we have a strong business community where people get jobs, and that's why we have record job levels now.
Yep.
But what would I say to him? I would say to him that it's time for a reset. You got yourself elected. But if you try to govern as a socialist, you'll run the city into the ground, AKA the second term of the de Blasio administration. Mm-hmm. It took 2 terms for him to run the city into the ground because it was so strong after 8 years of Giuliani and 12 years of Bloomberg. Right? But he's not going to do that. He's going. He may be even more forceful and ideological than de Blasio. So I think unfortunately, the socialist agenda will be profoundly realized and adversely affect the city faster than the lukewarm socialism of de Blasio.
So you think, like, when it comes to hiring for operational roles, he will really make those decisions based on ideology?
Absolutely. Yeah. Without question.
That seems like. But so if you were, again, he's not asking for your advice or necessarily mine, but like, if the city is clean, safe, and well run, then the voters are pretty open to other ideas that you might have, and whether or not you agree with free buses or childcare, city-owned grocery stores, they're not even really feasibly on the table unless you can do the blocking and tackling right. So isn't it in his interest as an ideologue to get the basics right, to keep someone like Jesse Tisch, keep the city safe, so that he can actually try to achieve the things he cares about?
Well, first of all, I can't imagine anyone going into City Hall or remaining to head the police department for a mayor who's taken the positions he has about the police, about public safety, about the business community, about the 1%. It's hugely polarizing, his agenda, actually. And if I were in the Jewish community, and I'm married to a nice Jewish doctor, okay, I would be terrified. Yeah. I would be terrified, okay? I'm just saying that I can't imagine that, someone like myself, or for that matter, some of our commissioners, including in the public safety area, would ever work for Mamdani.
Yeah, I hope you're wrong, simply because as a New Yorker, honestly, I'd feel a lot better if Jesse Tisch stayed in their job. But I fear that you're right. He won't want people like that, and they won't want to work for him. So, all right, the last question, which would be, all right, you got 3 months to go. You can pick one thing that you're going to use everything you've got to get it done. What is that thing?
Wow, that is a really, really good question. Well, we've just announced, and the mayor was very passionate about it.
Yep.
What we want to do to end the horse carriage industry.
Yep.
There's already 21 supporters in the city council. The only thing blocking that from happening, because the votes are there in the city council,
Yeah.
when you start with 21
Yeah, you'll pick up
co-sponsors,
5 more.
okay, is the speaker. All right? I mean, time to put your personal animus aside and let your members have a hearing and a vote. I think what's emerging is a consensus, and I think you'll see more major figures coming out against the horse carriage industry. Now is the time to end it. This mayor has a head and a heart. He's proposed things that should have been attractive to the industry now. We're going to get jobs for the workers. We're consider electronic carriages. We are, you voluntarily turn in your license, we will compensate you for that.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll even have some kind of, petting zoo or corral and stable for some of the horses so that New Yorkers can commune with the horses, and kind of honoring the history and tradition of the industry. Okay, all of these things, these would be wonderful things to do, but the time is now. The time has come that we have to move away in our intense urban environment. So the mayor put that on the table. I want to get that done.
Great. That is a worthwhile thing. Randy, thank you for coming on, and more important, thanks for coming back in and everything you're doing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bradley. Real pleasure to be with you.
Firewall is recorded at my bookstore, P&T Knitwear, located at 180 Orchard Street on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. We'd love to hear from you with questions, feedbacks, or idea for a guest. Just email me at bradley@firewall.media or find me on LinkedIn. And to keep up with what's on my mind and my latest writing, please follow my new Substack at bradleytuss.substack.com. Thanks again for listening.